I've hit record.
Why are you laughing?
I don't know, I'm very nervous.
I've not done anything yet.
I'm very nervous.
You don't normally hit record, Andy.
No, it's normally Finn.
How did it feel to be me?
I don't like it.
I mean, by the side of it, just riddled with anxiety. No offense.
I absolutely am. I'm just going to
I
fuck
feel like
it
I've
up.
got the easier job this week because I'm not on the recording side. I'm on the chat and listen side. So I will be the professional person.
I do have it quite easy, really, don't I?
I mean, well, you do deal with all the social media side of things, so I'm not going to be riding too high on my horse here.
Suddenly you get all the passwords to the social media accounts, and you're like, oh, God, please no.
Yeah, so should we do a proper intro to this?
Well, I do have like a little written thing.
Oh my God, that's an essay.
Yeah, Devin.
That's what I said. Of 3 people trying to get a podcast together.
We've got tech support issues, we've got wine.
Role reversal, we've got the whole bag.
I'm here for whatever you want to do. When I did my very short-lived podcast, which this episode would be your podcast outliving my podcast.
I'm not going to rub it in your face, it's fine. I've only known you for 5 seconds. It's fine.
Throw it in my face as much as you'd like. Essentially, we'd always start off our podcast with just a very simple, hi Finn, hi Andy.
You may have heard his lovely American dulcet tones, but so we've got a guest star this episode.
The little essay that Andy has is my little blurb intro that I think Andy should read, as she is our technical master today.
I shall do it in my best voice.
Go ahead, Andy.
So today we're joined by Devin. Devin is an award-winning playwright, screenwriter, and writer of prose and creative non-fiction. He's worked as a script editor in film and TV on shows like Ransom and The Window, and on development slates for independent production companies in the US and the UK. He holds a doctorate from the University College of London in creative critical writing, where he developed critical Gothic authorship, a method of writing and research that blends creative writing with academic research to put academic literary theory into practice. He's currently putting the finishing touches on his most recent feature film script and putting together a proposal for his next critical Gothic authorship novel, which examines how authors can express anxieties related to the climate crisis through fantasy literature. Hello, Devin.
That's me.
Hello, Devin.
Hello.
Devin's here to make us seem a lot more professional than we actually are. Hi, welcome to Path Publication.
Thank you.
And how have we been treating you well so far?
I feel very welcome and very at home. I was telling Andy earlier that I just feed on chaos energy, so this is all my bag. I'm here for it.
We had every type of chaos going.
We're all about that energy. Yeah, so as the viewers may know, like we take this very kind of like not seriously. We'll obviously talk about the topics about writing, that sort of thing, but we're not going to be kind of like, this is the thing you need to do. It's kind of like, these are the things that have helped us, these are the things that possibly will help you as well in your writing journey.
We're going to be looking at world building today, and there's nothing that I find more interesting and more stressful than world building.
Yeah, you were quite keen when I mentioned it.
I mean, I don't want to say that I invited myself onto the podcast when Andy mentioned it was world building, but I invited myself onto the podcast.
I have the text message to prove it.
It's like, okay, I'll come on it, but Finn has allowed not to speak at all for the entire hour that we speak.
Personally, I think you're overqualified for this podcast.
And why is that?
We're unpublished and uncredited, and you've got a whole IMDB page to give me imposter syndrome every time I talk to you.
Well, it's one of those funny things, because an IMDB page doesn't really... I mean, it does things for you, right? It lets people know that you have credits and things like that. But if you were to ask me whether, Devin, are you still on the path to publication?
You said it! You said it!
Because I have yet to actually be sort of... I mean, I have been published for my own writing, but nothing in the sense that makes me feel like I am actually a writer of any sort, even if I do have a few credits to my name. But it is one of those things where everything that you both are going through, submitting scripts to agents, submitting scripts to competitions, writing, like any kind of writing to agents or anything like that, I'm 100% still going through that. It's just... And I think this is the best bit about this podcast, is that both show that writing has its own individual journey. And even with my sort of credits, I'm sort of hoping that I can come on and say, this is my journey, this is the weirdness that it is, and that even, you can get close to that space, you can be in the industry, but sometimes it still doesn't happen. And that's okay. Fly too close to the sun, get burnt, fall back, start putting my wings together again.
It's a whole kind of cycle thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
Thank you for that. You speak a lot of truth there, as well. I mentioned it in the previous one as well, but I bet you like the top writers and showrunners from TV shows that seem to be getting billions and billions of views, that sort of thing. They have a day where it's like agents are like no, or a channel are like, we really like the script, but unfortunately it's a no from us. It's a complete universal experience, not just the people at the start that getting all the rejections. Everyone gets rejection.
Rejection is a massive part of wanting to do this, which when I first started was very much something you sort of know, but until you go through quite a few of them, it's very painful.
Yeah.
Especially when you've got that one script that you think in particular, you've got it in your hand, you finish it, you've done many drafts, you've had a lot of people, quite big people, give you a thumbs up on it and say, this is very good and things like that. I can see this as a show. And you can take it to an agent and they'll immediately be like, I've loved this. I read it in one night, in one sitting. Fantastic. No.
Yeah. It's frustrating. I know. It's like, I know that they can't say yes to everyone as well. That's not the point we're trying to make here. It's like every stage of this process, there's going to be somebody there that's going to have loads of people with similar ideas, with completely different ideas, where they're just not the capacity to do that particular script at that particular time, or they've got too many of the same of that particular script, and they want some variety. Just going devil's advocate there. I'm not an agent, but that's what I'm assuming is happening.
There's definitely instances where agents and producers will look at a script and think it's fantastic, and then they'll literally have no idea what to do with it.
Right, well, I'm changing.
And he just disappeared off the face of the earth.
I'm changing my mind about all of this.
And his little video thing's just gone dark now as well. We have Thanos here from the podcast.
So I suppose one of the harder things is as well, once you do get them rejections or it doesn't go anywhere, you go back to the drawing board, a new idea, you've got to develop a whole new idea to try and go even further with that one.
Definitely, and I think this is one of the interesting things, though. Something I always love about writing is that fresh start. And that's one of the massive and big draws, I think, when it comes to people really wanting to write something that involves a lot of world building. Segue back to the topic.
Yeah.
And pulling that in. And that's why world building is this sort of really big window, because you can sort of really sit yourself in the space, in the story, and from a lot of different stages. Because one thing I really wanted to ask you, both of you, when it came to your world building, when you've worked on it, how do you start?
I've been thinking about this as well, because I was writing my little note thing. I've got a little bullet point list, a little peek behind the curtain there, of things I wanted to talk about today. And the very, very end of that list, it's not quite a bullet point, because I've not really fully fledged it out in my mind, but I was treating the world as like another character, not in the way of the same way you would treat a character, but it feels like a silent character. It feels like the world still will go on a journey of some kind, whether for the better or the worse, if it's going to move at all. But it's not. This is why I haven't really worked this bit out. But at the end, I was basically just put world is a silent character ? It works similar ways that a character would work in a script, but not completely the same. To answer your question, Devin, at the beginning, I'd say probably with regards to the world building, I have the inciting incident. I'll have the big action piece that starts off the script. And that will normally be something that the characters have led. So I would probably say that the world building starts with the characters, and then it will evolve or react to whatever the characters are doing as you go through the scripts.
What about you, Andy?
Oh, I'm the total pantser of it. Everything unfolds as I'm writing. So I've got one of the stories I'm working on at the minute, the manuscript that's kind of, I'm not supposed to touch until I finish my script, but still.
You can peek at it, it's fine, no one's going to come for you.
It's going to end up being this whole giant world. It's going to be like a whole new society structure, a whole new way of living for everyone. I've got to start thinking of all the tiny details and how they play into the plot. And I don't do that. I just write. And then when something comes up, I'm like, oh, okay, how does the world develop from there? How is my character being affected by the world? And then I come up with, oh, this is what's happening in the world. This is how they're being affected by it. And that's how I end up with my giant plot holes.
I definitely think there's a lot of benefit to having your world be open and be malleable to the things that your characters are doing. Because that's just sort of helps to make sure that everything feels quite organic in how it develops and how it moves along with the plot. Besides the aforementioned plot holes, of course.
I think regardless of where you are in the script, the plot holes are going to happen at some point. Even stuff that you've not even considered, because how many times have you watched a film like, well, that doesn't logically happen because that should have happened over there, or that's the wrong time period, or whatever. It's an occupational hazard, and sometimes, some ways.
That approach is working okay in my novel. That's fine. I can go back and I can edit that. I don't need to have like established rules for the story to work. The world can bend around my character. In the script I'm writing at the minute, the time loop, I need to have the rules of the world built into the story for the story to work, because it's such a big part of the story. So my pantsy approach is not working with my manuscript, and I had a bit of a meltdown to Finn the other week about that.
You did. I had to do a bit of script doctoring for the first time in a while, actually. But yeah, I quite enjoyed it. It's like going through, it's like, I need to get to this end point. And I was like going, well, and this could happen, and then that could happen. And you can still have that thing you wanted to have happen at the end, but now you've got an alternate route of getting there. I mean, you shouldn't have to take that route. You could have been like, no, fuck you, Finn. But it could also be... I wanted to help you out as well, because I know the script means a lot to you. I mean, all script mean a lot to a lot of people, but...
But there is a lot of rigidity in the world of that script, particularly. And the story's not going to work if I'm just making it up as I go along, like I normally would. So, in that sense, I need to build the world before I build the story, before I build the script.
It's like, you can't have one thing not be there in those three things, otherwise the script will fall apart. You can't have a script without characters. You can't have a script without some kind of world building in place of it, because where is it going to get set? What are the rules of this particular story?
But this is one of the best things I love, and this particularly about TV. And I think this is one of the things that TV does really, really well, is that pilot episodes of a TV show are meant to tell you all of the rules of the world in 30 to 60 minutes. And then on top of that, it's also meant to give you its own contained story that's emotionally satisfying within that same time frame. And then on top of that, it needs to give you reasons to be interested in the characters that you're going to spend the next, 8 to 13 hours with. And so in that sense, you look at certain TV shows and you really clue into, and I think it says a lot about people's tastes in terms of whether TV shows do that really well or not. One example I always would give to students whenever I did any sort of teaching with screenwriting is a little TV show that not a lot of people have seen, that was back when Amazon first started doing their sort of content. And it was a show starring Jean-Claude Van Damme as a pastiche of himself. So the whole plot of the pilot episode is introducing Jean-Claude Van Damme as a secret agent for the American government, while using the cover of low-budget B movies to go around the world to pull off different operations.
I love it already.
It's fantastic. The first 5 minutes, or even not even that, probably the first scene of the TV show is him trying to go into one of his famous full-legged splits to roundhouse kick a goon. And he's like, and the voiceover is playing it. It's like, you know me as Jean-Claude Van Damme, action hero. But what you didn't know is I'm a real hero. But I'm also really old. And he can't go into the full splits, and he just takes a baton across the face in slow motion. And he gets knocked to the ground, and he's like, I'm so old now. And it is just, it plays on him as a person, as a character, perfectly. But that's the world, is him refusing to retire and messing up mission after mission. And it's such a great way to establish something so quickly, and it's such a satisfying way for your audience.
Yeah, you can definitely, just by that description of the scene as well, you can instantly tell like what you're in for the rest of that TV series. And you can tell that Jean-Claude Van Damme is kind of like relishing in the fact that he can take the piss out of himself and still get a paycheck at the end of the day.
Exactly. And because of that, he's all in on the series. He's all in on the jokes.
He can even probably throw something in himself as well. I was about to say as well regarding examples, the first thing that came to mind was the first opening scenes of Umbrella Academy. But the very opening scene doesn't involve any of the main characters, but it sets up the world pretty quickly, actually. So if you haven't already seen the pilot, turn your ears off now. It basically sets up with I think it's set in some kind of Russian school or something like that. But there is a young teen relationship happening. The boyfriend kisses the girlfriend jumps in a swimming pool and comes out pregnant. There's no explanation about how she gets pregnant. It just happens instantly. And shortly after coming out of the swimming pool, she gives birth to a baby. And then it's established that there are at least, I think, not just 7, I think there's more than 7 occurrences of this happening on the same birthday. And then obviously that will then lead into the plot of, here are the 7 main characters, this is what Umbrella Academy is. So with that respect, it kind of sets the world up first and then has the characters introduced later.
One of the really interesting things that I think I really love about world building is that there's kind of no right or wrong way to do it. In the sense, it's, I think Andy's heard me, bang this drum all the time, is that there's a specific way to approach a specific story, and every story has its own sort of path that you kind of have to follow, whether that's the medium in which you tell that story or even the way that you craft it. I mean, you can have sort of rough general guidelines of how to start stories with, sort of character bios, story outlines, beat plots, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, once you actually get into the writing, the story is going to kind of sort of guide you through how it wants to be told. And I think that's such a good example of showing these 2 different shows in terms of how they approach their world building. I think this kind of comes across more often in books, really, than anything, is world building's relationship to narrative kind of falls into 2 camps. And there's that first camp of, I'm going to tell you everything about this world. And I'm going to find moments and reasons for me to just sort of, in a not boring way, just really exposition bomb you. Because exposition isn't necessarily, I think, a bad thing if it's done well. It can be really important. And then there's the other camp, which is, I'm going to tell you nothing. We're just going through the story, and you're going to learn it when the character learns it, and that's that. And it really also depends on sort of whether that is actually to the benefit of the story. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Andy, where it's like your novel, you can kind of be a bit more flexible in how you develop the world, whereas with the script, it's like, no, we need to know the rules to understand the story of the script.
Yeah, and for my script, it's really difficult to give you the rules without being boring with it.
I've had a couple of scenes in my script as well, which basically like, this is the exposition scene. How do I make this not become an obvious exposition scene?
Yeah, because I think that's going to turn off a viewer, a reader, so quick, is if you're just going to throw everything at them and expect them to understand straight away. They're gone. They're going to switch off.
I'm reminded of the quote from the Simpsons movie with President Schwarzenegger. I'm elected to lead, not to read. I just have that going on in my head when I'm writing a big, long exposition scene. Sorry, Andy, go on.
If the bigger the world goes, the more you've got to give the exposition. And that's quite a difficult balance. Because again, you want the reader, you want the viewer to know everything. So they're going into it prepared. So that you can throw things at the characters that are normal for them, out of the ordinary for the viewer, and not bore them.
There are ways around it, I believe.
Well, my setting's a time loop. So that's going to be quite repetitive. That's going to be quite boring. That's going to be stretched, I think, quite a lot.
When you mentioned it when we're doing the script doctoring thingy earlier on, Andy, and I was like, even though yours is the time loop script and necessarily the same thing happens over and over again, Groundhog Day, it does exactly the same thing. But it's not exactly the same scene over and over again. There are nuances. The character will go into different parts of the town as they learn that the same day's happening over and over again. Small things change as it goes along. The townspeople may act exactly the same, but the principal characters, they will change, however perceivably small that might be.
Groundhog Day is a great example, because even if we know the rules of the world immediately when he sort of wakes up on sort of the second and third day, as he's going around and exploring the town, even though technically the same day is happening again, we're learning more about the world because he's going out and seeing more of that world, the repeated world, as it were. And because he's changing bit by bit, he's influencing our perspective, so we're seeing the world differently through his eyes again.
I was also thinking of Palm Springs. Have you seen that one?
I love Palm Springs.
Fantastic. Great film. Finn, have you seen it?
I've not heard of it. Go on.
Oh,
I feel like you can't give too much away.
I should jet myself out of the podcast now.
I mean, basically, all you need to know is Andy Samberg, Time Loop, and Wedding.
Oh, okay.
It's fantastic.
Where would I find this? Which platform is it on?
It's on Amazon, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, sure, I can find that.
Palm Springs is like a beautiful, 90 minutes. Just perfect 90 minutes. Just it makes every time I sit down and watch a 90-minute movie, it makes me so happy.
What's its unique selling point when it comes to the world building?
I don't want to give it away.
Well, it's you essentially have a character who is our main protagonist, and she's outside of the time loop when we sort of first meet her and things like that. And then we watch her enter the time loop, and then when she meets Andy Samberg's character, they then try to navigate it together.
Oh, okay. So
Which
yeah, okay.
she's quite lucky in this as a character because she's got the character who's already in, who can be quite engaging and explain the entire world to her. Like it's
Yeah.
established, he's well experienced in it. He is the exposition character.
But the best bit is because he knows exactly what's going to happen because he's been in the time loop so often, he can show and not tell. And that's what makes the exposition land really, really well because he can be like, and then look over there, and then look over there.
The perfect exposition device. That's one of the mantras when you start learning to write and do creative writing, that sort of thing. It's like showing, not telling. And it's very, very, very easy to be like, to tell everything and not show it. I'll have a character explain the entire thing, but in a way that's not dynamic and not kind of memorable for anybody viewing it. So, like I said, I've got a scene a couple of months back where it was set in it's a police procedural, and it was set in a police interview room. But it was basically just, these are the bad guys, this is what they've done, go and find out more information. It's like, this isn't that exciting. I need another way of introducing this thing by showing it rather than saying it. So I think I've ended up splitting up the scene and moving certain parts to certain areas and having other characters tell them what happened. I found another way around it, basically.
We've been watching Westworld recently, and that's a great example of telling,
Oh, yeah.
not showing. Because I love that they explain the rules of the world to you, the whole world to you, as though you're coming into it as a player, as a character for them. And it's set up like a game, so you're going through the tutorials, you're learning the world, you're learning the rules, and it's very engaging. It's very impressive as a viewer and as a reader, because I've read the scripts as well. Like that's a
Are you
that's a
just
great
watching the
example
first
of it.
season at the minute?
No, we're on the second.
Oh, you've gone too far then. Turn back, you fool.
That's an example of the world itself keeping me engaged rather than the story, though.
That's entirely true. Yes.
Like they've built the world up so well
Yeah.
that I love watching it for the aesthetic, for the engagement, just for the whole idea of being like a real life roleplay character. Stories, boo.
Yeah, both my wife and I left Westworld in season 1, and we haven't carried on to any of the other ones, so we just have this perfect slice of TV that we're just sort of like, we are not touching this.
You're so lucky.
This reminds me of when a long-running sitcom series has like a finale episode and ends up having like a whole new season because the network wants more episodes, and it just seems to like cheapen that finale. Obviously, the obvious example there would be Scrubs, but their world is.
I was about to say, I could already see that perfect season finale in my brain.
Describe a sitcom without mentioning any of the characters. But yeah, no, it's literally like I love that world because it's kind of you've got both extremes of like valuable, wholesome, like these characters, somebody who is like a JD or is like a Dr. Cox. Then you've also got the harshness of the reality of the world where people die all the time or relationships break down, those sort of things. And it's done in a way where even though you can have an episode that's kind of like really light and fluffy, but also very, very dark and serious, and it doesn't feel like it's a right turn. It feels it flows nice and smoothly. It fits for the world that you're in. And yeah, it's great.
And it makes sense when you get a musical episode.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. You've got a musical episode and you've got an episode that doesn't quite fit the traditional sitcom format. It works because you've got a character like JD who daydreams all the time, who is a musical theatre kid and has those kind of links where it quite naturally fits in. And there's no kind of like disconnect.
And brings one great amount of joy. But even then, that episode in particular still holds to the show's world, still holds to the tone of the show, because the reason why the musical is there is quite a horrible garbage.
Yeah, it's as a patient with a very serious condition, which I think there's some version of that actually exists in real life. Not necessarily people living in a musical, but there is a version of that happening in real life. But they've used that real life thing and they've made it work for the world they've built. And that's great.
I've never seen it. Never seen Scrubs.
Oh my God.
Andy, get up.
So Finn and I are doing the podcast.
I'll go watch Palm Springs. You watch the entirety of Scrubs.
Yeah. But
Devin,
don't go into season 8. For the love of God, do not go into season 8 of Scrubs.
Is it like season 2 of Westworld?
Yeah, season 9, just don't bother. Doesn't exist. Season 8 is all as far as you need to go. Stop there. There is nothing else. Just stop there.
I was thinking, when it comes to world building, I initially had a concept that I was really overwhelmed at the time, and I had this character that I thought to myself, like, you know what? I have all this anxiety about thinking about decisions that I should have done, could have done, that sort of thing. And I thought, what if there was a way that this character could kind of, like, access all of these decisions at once to try to sort of, like, piece their way through it, a bit something like Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I remember reading a Ted Chiang short story about this thing, and the short story was basically about these people. A new technology was basically Twitter, or X, sorry, formerly known as Twitter. And the
It's
idea...
Twitter. We don't recognize the other name.
We reject that reality and substitute our own world building. The story revolves around everyone getting these technology called a prism, and essentially the prism lets you, as like a one-way radio or a two-way radio with one other person in a different reality, you can communicate with each other, and different prisms allow you to communicate with different realities. And I thought to myself, so much of my time can be spent on social media doom scrolling, and oftentimes that happens on the toilet. So I thought to myself, what if this short story is basically a version of Twitter, except all the people that you follow are alternate versions of yourself, and the entire story unfolds as this person is trying to put their life back together after a bad breakup, scrolling through their multi-dimensional Twitter, trying to figure out where they went wrong with their life.
Oh my god.
I love it. I'd watch that in a heartbeat. It's a perfect take on social media, and also kind of like the way that sometimes people use social media as an extension of themselves, toot their own horn basically, but the only people who are going to listen to it are already themselves. But yeah, I love it. It's a great concept.
It's your echo chamber, quite literally your echo chamber, except it is just
Yeah.
yourself.
How would you show the rules of that world if it's just Twitter on the shitter?
Oh my god, that's the title. That's the title. Sold.
Episode 1, Twitter on the shitter. Let's
Yeah.
go.
I mean, my idea behind it was originally sort of conceived as a short story. And so with that, with the prose, I would basically just sort of have the character in sort of first person kind of, or actually probably even third person would be better, because in third person prose, you have that omniscient view of things, and you can sort of just jump into different perspectives from there. And so it's just going to be sort of that bird eye view of, and so saw this as his 0012 counterpart was doing this, and that sort of thing. But I actually think to adapt that to sort of a visual medium, I think the best thing you do is essentially have the same character. You just do costume changes and see that person posting what they're posting about. Because you can essentially have, especially, the first scene could really just be 4 different versions of the same person, all on the shitter on Twitter.
I can see the shot. It's like an overhead shot.
You could even do it Rick and Morty style, where you have him have the character typing something out on Twitter, and he's about to post it, and then you have it go split screen. One person posts it, the other person doesn't, and then they get on with their day. And then halfway through their day, they sort of check their phone, and somebody does something else, and then that person branches off, and then you have more screens. Exactly.
Oh, I love that idea.
I love this already. I've also kind of like gone through with world building, that sort of thing, as like scope and scale of your world. Like, how big is the world inside of a script? Is it something that's quite contained? Like a home invasion would be quite claustrophobic and quite self-contained. Everything within one particular building. It doesn't tend to kind of go outside of that building unless it's Act 3 kind of thing. Or something that's got like unlimited scope, like an episode of Doctor Who. Obviously, when I say that, they do have their own kind of limitations within their own episodes. Yes, he can go wherever he wants in time and space and different dimensions, but he tends to like modern-day London, or occasionally he'll go over to New York for a bit. Other than that, other planets. But he'll always kind of start off in London or around London. He'll always end the series in the same place. There'll be a Dalek somewhere, there'll be a Cyberman somewhere. But yeah, even with shows with unlimited scope, there's always kind of like a limitation.
It's one of those really interesting things, and I think this really does apply mostly to anything that's sort of visual, in that we really have to ground our perspective. I mean, I think this also goes with not just sort of like screenwriting, but also like playwriting as well. When you think about a theater space, you have what is the world on the stage? And you can't really extend beyond that stage too much because we can see the limitation of it. We know, like, the audience comes in and knows that it's a stage. And then with film and TV, it's sort of we have the box, we have the frames that we're in, right? So we have to understand what do we need to say of the world that's within these frames. And so because of that, you can't really push it too far in terms of trying to tell stories outside of those frames. Whereas within books or even like graphic novels to a certain degree, you can kind of, or even an audio drama format, you can play with those boundaries significantly more. Like there's one book I absolutely love called Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. And it's a murder mystery book that is entirely told through the perspective of an old lady living in a village who has nothing to do with the murders at all. And you're just following her life, and the murder is just happening all in the background of this world. But you're grounded in her perspective through the whole story.
I love that.
It's so expertly done. And because of that, it's one of those things where you really, when you're writing, you just really understand what your reader or your viewer needs at any given scene and any given moment for any given story. There's a craft to that which is just, I'm so envious of when people can pull it off. I literally have one story for my next, well, it's not my next book, it's going to be the book after the next book, unless this book comes forward for other reasons, because of a meeting next week. But one of those books is literally the universe that the story is set in is a part of the narrative itself, because, you know, secrets of that world are going to be unraveled as part of the narrative. So it's quite important that, you know, within my little notebook, I've literally got like diagrams of what the world actually looks like and things like that. But it's
take a photo of that.
Honestly, if you could read my handwriting, then that's the challenge enough, and you can have it.
On the back of this, I have a question though.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you write in particularly scripts, ones that you want to sell, the commercialization of them, how much do you bear in mind the budgetary side of it when you're writing? Because if you want a big world, obviously that's going to be big budget kind of thing, and that's going to have a knock-on effect to how commercialized your script can be, how, you know, what potential you've got for selling it. People are going to look at it and go, it's too big for us, we can't do that. And then you have to condense the world, condense the story. It's a great question. You know, do you go big from the beginning, or do you constrain yourself at that writing stage?
I think the answer I have to this is both unhelpful and frustrating.
Honestly, we love unhelpful and frustrating.
Welcome to writing.
Magic.
Exactly. Because that's the only job I can get. Coat man. I think it's really important to enjoy what you're writing and what you're writing at any given time. And if that big budget bombastic thing gives you joy to write, that's what you need to write at that time. The reason why I sort of set this project before the other project recently was because the two books I want to write next, I have this one that the universe itself is sort of part of the story and a part of a character, and that's not very commercial book. The other book I want to write is a super hyper commercial book, like unbelievably commercial book. And I've written screenplays that have been geared to super hyper commercial, and the screenplay that I was talking to you about, Andie, my time loop screenplay, is very much sort of like take that high concept and ground it in something we really know and something that's really simple, in the sense that these people who operate in time loops go into time loops, pull people out of time loops. That's what they do. Full stop. But everything that we see looks and resembles modern day. And the time loop component is literally they walk into a room, push like a little device on their wrist, sort of Power Ranger style. And what it looks like when they jump into the time loop is you literally just hard cut them out of the scene. So you're there, you do a match cut, pop, they're gone. Budget-wise, that costs nothing. You take the frame that you film is the actor in the room pushing the button, and the next frame is the exact same frame, the actor out of the frame, the room's empty. I think a great example of this is the film Predestination. So It's starring Ethan Hawke and Sarah Snook of Succession fame, and it's essentially about a story where somebody gets recruited to a time agency to go back in time to try to stop a bomber. And from there, that's the setup, and then the story just unspools from there. It is very time loopy, but in a way that is satisfying, that if you think really, really hard about it, you could probably poke some holes in it, but it's complex enough and deep enough to where if you give it like a halfway thought, you're like, actually, no, this does all track. I'm cool with this. And again, a beautiful 93-minute film. Oh, after my heart. And that's that sort of example of taking these really big concepts, but realistically, it goes back to what are we seeing in the frame? What do we need to see in the frame? And this goes back to what Finn was talking about with Doctor Who as well, and why Doctor Who essentially has lasted as long as it has, is because they basically figured out the formula of we don't really need really big budget things to convey a big budget feeling.
Do we need a quarry? Yes.
Exactly. Write the big budgets, put them forward, because at the end of the day, that's the example of your writing. If you want to show that you're writing, that's what it is. And if you want to make something commercial and you're really passionate about that thing that makes it commercial, go for it. But commercial is such a really weird term, and especially in today's industry space, especially in the UK market, you've got what I refer to as a lot of safe risks. And I mean, very contradictory term, but essentially what a lot of stuff that comes out on TV nowadays is the crime drama that has complex, unique characters, or the medical drama with complex, unique characters. And that is something that, unfortunately, due to whatever reasons in the world, COVID being a very big one of them, is that all of our filming markets have become a lot smaller. And so the money available to take those big budget risks has gone evaporated. So with that in mind, these sort of more commercial ideas, what we can put out, what we are capable of putting out, and those are what come to the forefront. A lot of the bigger budget stuff, is sort of getting like sidelined or taking a lot more time to develop. And so because of that, it could seem that there's a marketplace where actually like the big budget ideas aren't really wanted. But I think if it shows your talent as a writer and your ability to world build, then, you just kind of have to go for that thing. Or you just look for a different medium. Like, I know so many people who have taken a screenplay and said, you know what, I can't get this developed as film and TV. You go make it a graphic novel. A lot of people do that, and they turn out fantastic work because they get an illustrator on board, and, it just turns into a great piece of art.
That reminds me of when Andie got her script read, set as was it an animation? And they said, this would work as a live action thing as well.
To be fair, I only set that as an animator to try and detract it away from the reality of it. Like, I wanted it to be a bit more fantastical, a bit more out there, outlandish. So I don't want to change it.
Or you go really hard on the outlandishness of it, and you have a mix of live action and animation.
Oh, like Lizzie McGuire.
Oh my God, yeah. Do it now, while we wait.
When I was writing that script, it was easy for me to build the world because I was basing it on something. I was very well versed in that particular industry. I knew what I could put across, and I was taking quite a few real life experiences that I'd had and then exaggerating them quite greatly to build the world. I can't do that with
But this is the fantastic thing with world building, is that you can introduce readers or viewers to a world in a very grounded way. I mean, one of the really great examples of that is Stephen King's Dark Tower series. And if you've read the whole Dark Tower series, you know that it's sort of this like really massive, grand, epic fantasy that lasts 8 books. The very first line of that very first book, the man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. That's the first line. Okay, there's a desert, there's one man chasing another man. That's all I need to know. And that's 8 books. That is the 8 books. The gunslinger chases the man in black.
It's perfect. It's like that one sentence can set up an entire 8-book series just on one sentence. That's just the power of like being able to hone in on that one central idea that kickstarts something.
Exactly, and that allows you to unfold the world around that idea. And of course, it's Stephen King, so he knows what he's doing. But at the same time,
there is no doubt in anyone's mind that he's going to screw the pooch. Effectively, he's like, no, it's going to be perfect. I'm going to love it for the whole ride that it's there for. With the exception of those 2 movies that he directed himself in the 90s that everybody shits on.
We're not going to talk. He saw his wheelhouse and he stuck to his wheelhouse. But it's even one of these interesting things where a more recent example, the writer Alex Phoebe is currently in the process of writing this really fantastic fantasy trilogy, and the first half of the first book is a heist. And so we sort of get this idea of the world. It's very gothic. It has all these sort of weird, like magic is like changing reality and all these things because magic is essentially reality. He dives into that a lot more in the second book. But in the first book, we sort of get just a taste of these ideas, but it's all packaged as part of this heist. And then the second half of the book is, because of events from the heist, our main protagonist winds up essentially going to sort of a magical apprenticeship. And then that's where we start really learning about sort of the history of the world, because he's literally going to school. I think why oftentimes you see a lot of tropes within books and films and TV where it's like your character is going to school to learn about the world.
And that is a great narrative device. It kind of like it hides like here's going to be a lot of exposition and how the world works, but in a way where it's not going to be I'm telling you this, I'm showing you it. Come along for the ride. See yourself in the main character as they're experiencing this school, this journey.
Definitely, and that's when you go and you think about sort of thinking about the story that you want to tell. That's one of those examples where you think about world and plot kind of comes first. We were sort of saying, like, I have this idea or this concept about this sort of story I want to tell. I reluctantly call them tropes or cliches, but these are tools that writers can use to sort of get into their worlds in terms of how do I best inform audiences about this. Like, I think about Netflix's Sabrina, the Teenage Witch adaptation, I guess, or revival.
Yeah, the one that's based on the Archie comic one.
Exactly, and it's perfect because she's entering into the world of riches while still balancing that against the world of mortals. So you obviously have this duality that lets you see the difference, that highlights the differences in both. So you really clue into the big beats of like where are these different and what does that then tell us about one world or the other.
That's another example though of me watching because I enjoy the world rather than the story. Because they completely lost the plot with the story after the first season again. But because I was invested in the world itself, like I was enjoying the magical, again, that duality of the mortals and the witches. I was really invested in the world. I carried on watching it, even if it wasn't a great experience.
Do you find yourself as sort of a reader or viewer more interested and more engaged in worlds? Or do you find yourself more interested and engaged with sort of characters that inhabit the world?
I'd say probably the worlds over the characters. If you build an interesting enough world, I can picture any character.
I'd probably say the characters over the worlds.
Amazing.
Well, this is why we're
I just want to be contrarian, like, no, the characters over the world.
I just feel like I just want to like sit down and just sort of take a sip of my wine and be like, point proven.
Well, we're always opposites with these things.
But I think this is good. It's important. It's important to illustrate that obviously people gravitate towards different things, and that at the end of the day, when it comes to actually writing these things, you need to just figure out what is going to actually just help you finish the thing. That's the most important thing. How do I actually get this done? And then work on it and edit it. And then on top of that, how can I then make the most sense, make it most cohesive? How do my characters and my plot need to speak and operate and exist in my world?
Yeah, I definitely relate to the I need to finish this mantra of that.
See.
I'm in that bit, that part of my procedural thing where it's like, this is becoming very, very long because I'm filling it with loads of stuff that at the time seemed important. But when I'm reading it back, I'm like, that's not so important to the plot. It's just rather than just feel like this is the important parts of the plot, then put that in afterwards. I also had a little point on here about how fluid is your world, like in regards to like what happens at the end of your story, at the end of your script. Is it the world will spring back to where it was at the beginning of the story? Is it quite fixed? Is it resistant, but mostly the same? Does it go up on a high note, on a low note, that sort of thing? What do you guys think about that?
I can't think with that one. I think I'm quite rigid in my worlds, but that's because the stories are about the people not trying to change the world. It's about the people changing. So there's quite small stories in the grand scheme of things.
Especially if you sort of know from that sort of story perspective that the world sort of exists for your characters to change. And, is it one of those things where because of things that happen outside of their control, i.e. as part of the world that facilitates their change, as opposed to something perhaps a bit more grandiose where it's like, no, the change that the characters go through changes the world itself.
Absolutely. The biggest one I can think of recent memory is like Fallout, the TV series. because that's got the biggest world-changing thing happen in the first couple of seconds, where the entirety of, I think, California at that point, maybe even the whole of the US, is under a nuclear holocaust. So how the characters will change physically, mentally, how their stories change as well to deal with that kind of whole upheaval of society.
I think they had a really challenging thing to deal with, because they've established one world, then they undo that. Then they have to establish a whole other world with the vaults, and then they have to undo that to then take the vault dweller topside, and then establish a whole world that's topside. And they handled it really well, I thought.
I mean, because the fascinating thing is that if you think about that first season, there's technically 3 worlds. There's the pre-bomb world, where we do revisit, even after we've seen that it's changed, we do revisit it, and the context around that world is changed, because, again, our character is learning different perspectives. And then we have the vault world, which is evolving and changing as, again, the characters in the vaults learn about the different vaults, which then changes their perspective on their world. And then we have our main protagonist who's going up to the surface, and the perspective that she had of that whole world is then changed as she's going through that world.
And it also does the effect of having effectively 3 main characters, really, but they all do the GTA 5 thing, where it's like they all act as the ways that people act in the game as well. The Vault Dweller being the people new to the series, the Ghoul being the one who just wants to kill everything and doing a genocide run, and then you've got the Brother of Steel, who wants to do just the story, basically.
I think this is the best thing about, and I think about world building, and we think about adaptation. So one of the things that when I was working at one company here in the UK, one of the things I focused on the most was adaptations. And the key thing about adaptations is literally getting the world right, and not just the world, but your audience's perception of the world. And not only does Fallout do this really well, but also the Dungeons and Dragons movie does this really, really well.
Yes!
Where you've got different scenes where you literally can think to yourself, that character has just rolled a natural 1. And so this crazy thing is rolling out because they've ultimately failed, whether that's triggering a trap by accident, or, you know, the mirror has flipped upside down that they're trying to pass through, or something like that. And so, and those archetypes also exist. So not only are you sort of successfully adapting the world visually, but you're also adapting your audience's perspective of the world, which is not an easy thing to do, because ultimately, sometimes some people who own IPs are very, very precious about that property. And they have their own perspective of how they feel their property should be viewed, as opposed to somebody who can bring a creative vision and say, this is what this property actually is.
I completely agree with that. Yeah. There's so many bad adaptations that you can think of, that when an actual good adaptation comes through, you're like, oh, good, I need more of this. Sometimes they don't get honoured as much as all the bad adaptations that come out over the years. Because audiences are smart. Audiences will know if you're trying to shell them down the river, or if you're actually caring about how they perceive the world as well.
I think that's why The Last of Us did really well as well. They cared about the world and adapting the world faithfully.
Well, you also have, you know, Neil Druckmann was a very large part of the developing of that TV series too. So, you know, you had somebody who has been through the entire development process of the world through its entirety. You know, not just from the first game, but from the second game as well, a part of adapting that TV series too. I think in a few interviews he was very vocal about the fact that it's like, this show will do things that we couldn't do in the game because we didn't have time for, or just because, you know, it didn't make sense in terms of combining story and gameplay.
Yeah, completely agree with that.
I'm really interested to see how they're going to do. I mean, Andy's already heard me talk about this, but I'm going to be very fascinated to see how they do Season 2. Just because the upheaval of the world is so, not necessarily jarring, because I think narratively and character-wise it makes a lot of sense for you to have character development and to sort of justify a sequel. What happens is very important to happen to those characters. But the structure of in which it happens in the game, I think, is... I mean, I think a lot of people were very angry, and sort of communities were very... I have no polite words to say for how people reacted to that game. But ultimately, I think that a lot of that probably could have been avoided from a structural point of view in terms of how the story unfolded. And I'm still hoping Andy will play the game one day. As opposed to if you want to put yourself through that difficult 18 hours of gameplay.
I just don't think it's right for me now. It's been spoiled.
Well, I mean, but I think that literally is just the inciting incident. There's a lot more of the game after that.
It is one again that if I go back to it, I'm going back to it for the world.
But is there anything else on the agenda to speak about regarding world building?
I think we've actually hit all the points that I scribbled down.
I always find the most fascinating thing with world building is how so many people do it in so many different ways. I mean, you've got, like I mentioned, the Dark Tower series where Stephen King like sets the whole tone in one line. You've got, if you think about like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings film, he gives you the entire just under 2,000-year history of the Second Age in the first 5 minutes of the movie. And it's done in a way that's super interesting and engages you. And then you're sort of like, there's this terrible magical ring. It's in the hands of this one person. We're at this person's birthday party. So it's one of those fascinating things of like, here's the world, and here's something you recognize. Birthday party.
I love that. I love that way of like connecting the viewer with your world in the shortest amount of time possible, and also keeping it engaging at the same time.
Yeah,
Root it in the familiar.
exactly.
Yes,
And I think
that's
that's sort of, no matter how wild or crazy your world gets, trying to think of a way to sort of convey information. Think about how you get information in your daily life. How does information come to you in a way that is familiar and doesn't bore you? And I think when you sort of start Twitter on the shitter, exactly. when you contextualize the world in that sort of way, you suddenly realize that world building is all just about how you visualize a world, how you take in your own reality. And when you think about the ways that you ground yourself in the world, then you can start thinking about ways that your characters would ground themselves in the world. It's that sort of weird thing of like, well, how would you react if you were, on the Nostramos and, you found like a weird alien egg like popping about? Would you as well like do the horror trope of like poke the egg, or do you do sort of like the cabin in the woods thing where you're like, it's a horror movie, I've seen this, turn away, I flee.
Where are the exits, and how can I get there the quickest amount of time possible?
Exactly.
I'll take that route.
I mean, to be honest, if people want a masterclass of world building, watch Cabin in the Woods. I mean, no matter how you feel about sort of like the tyrannical attitude and bullying of Joss Whedon, like the man knows how to craft a world.
That is a great.
So if you watch Cabin in the Woods, it is just world building to a T in the best way possible. Because that's high concept, and realistically, when you think about the high concept, but the budget involved, probably the majority of that film's budget went into the last 2-minute VFX scene. And then another VFX scene in the film that I will not spoil for people because it's the best. In the feature film script that I'm writing right now, our structure is very, very similar, where the whole idea of it is very, very grounded and very sort of affordable. But then the very last act of the movie, we have big VFX moments. But we know, as a reader, if we've got you in those first 2 acts, if we sort of blow up the third act, budget-wise, we've already got you. There's a fantastic science fiction film called, I think, Thank You for Reading. It's essentially this person who reads a paper and responds to an advert of like, I have discovered time travel. And the person is like a freelance reporter, and they're like, I'm going to go interview this person for an article for the journal. And then they basically go and they interview this person, and in the whole movie introduces this tiny little nugget at the start of the film, which is like, is this real? Has this guy actually discovered time travel? And then that's the drama of the movie, and that's the world building. And since it's so familiar, you have to ask yourself, is this actually the world that I know, or is it something different? And then that becomes part of the conflict of the story.
I think I've heard of that, but I've not seen it.
It's very, very good. It's Mark Duplass. I would also really briefly like to correct myself, and it's not Thank You for Reading. It's Safety Not Guaranteed is the name of the movie. 2012 film.
Do you have anything else to add there, Andy, or do you want to draw this to a close?
No, I think that's been great. Devin, you've done a lot of the talking there, but you've had some fantastic insight.
It's the American in me. I honestly can't help myself. It's a problem.
I don't want to be rude to talk over you the entire time. That's the British in me.
I just didn't want to talk. That's the introvert in me.
I'm not going to have any time to do anything else other than watch TV this weekend, aren't I?
You're just going to have to tell Ash, like, whatever plans you had is off. You've got Palm Springs and Safety Not Guaranteed now.
Yeah, sorry, it's all cancelled. Very important TV business at the moment.
Yes,
If he can
you
make
and Ghost have a lot of TV business to attend to.
if he can make you watch Contact, you can make him watch one of these films.
I've not finished the film yet. We watched half of Concept when we first moved in.
Contact is a
I couldn't take
fantastic...
any more.
Oh no! Finn, did you hear that?
Hold on. Who says Contact isn't a good movie?
Finn.
Concept of the story, just like, this does not interest me in the slightest. And Ash just convinced he wants to shove it down my throat. And like, no, it's so bad, it's good. It's like, no, it's just bad. It's just bad, Ash.
Okay, I need to watch Contact again. I mean, because I have very fond memories of Contact. I don't know if it's just because I was like Jodie Foster traveling about and being okay to go. Because at the time of like when I watched the movie, I as a human being was not okay to go. So I need to reconfigure my perspective on that film. But I have very fond memories of it.
I'll watch the other half of it, and maybe my opinion will change. Like, oh my god, it's the best movie ever.
If I just watch the other half of the movie.
It's maybe like a completely different movie on the other half of it. I think the thing that I mentioned to Andy the very first time I saw it was like, within the first 20 minutes, of course she's going to have sex with Matthew Mahoney. You know?
All right.
I showed Nick Les Miserables at the weekend. It's the first time he'd seen it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
How many tears?
Either.
They were all my tears.
So you had enough for the both of you.
Yeah. He was just watching it, just going, this is so sad. This is really sad. Why are we watching this? This is so sad.
I'm like, Andy, what have you done to me?
For the last 3 days, all he's been doing is singing Do You Hear the People Sing?
Amazing.
Although I could carry on talking like this for ages.
Oh yeah, I'm quite happy to do. I'm just having a lovely conversation.
I mean, what we can do now is we can all go top up drinks, and then now it's after publication by midnight.
This is where we talk the dirtiest films.
Thank you, Devin, for joining us, and thank you for joining us in this conversation.
This has been the Path to Publication.
I have been Finn.
And I've been Andy.
And I've been Devin.
Have a lovely rest of your evening. And we got the intro out that fucking it up, guys.
Hey guys, this has been a bumper episode, which means we've got bumper bloopers for you. Here's the things that didn't quite make it. Devin is an award-winning playwright, screenwriter, and writer of prose and creative non-fiction. He's worked as a screen editor.
Woo!
Oh, I messed that up.
Sorry. That was me. I'm sorry, that was me.
Finn, shh.
Sorry.
Try that one again. That approach is working okay in my novel. That's fine. I can go back and I can edit that. By the way, this is Ash.
Hi, it's my
This is
husband.
Finn's husband.
Do you need to get changed in here?
No.
Please
Just
don't.
letting you know that I'm getting things and then obviously I've got to go to work. So
Okay, it's fine.
enjoy your podcast and I shall see you in the morning.
Okay, I'll see you in the morning. Sorry.
Bye, Ash.
Keep it
You're having
in.
a lovely,
Keep it in.
lovely. Welcome to the Amazon delivery of the podcast, where a large part of it gets cut out because something happens unexpectedly. Sorry, as you were, I didn't mean to interrupt. Andy, you still with us?
No, I'm buffering.
But isn't there something...
When you mentioned this... Sorry, go on.
Go ahead, Ben. No, you first.
no, after you.
I've just said this too.
Ghost, you go first. To self-read on myself.
Punctuated by Squeaky Toy.
Punctuated by Squeaky. Sorry, Ghost, if you haven't realised, Ghost has announced his presence. He is here. He will not leave me alone.
I'm fully on board with it. This is just Ghost perpetuating that world building of ball.
Well, actually, no, he's progressed now. The world has grown to now he's got a bone, not just a ball.
Listeners, that's what we call character development.
Can you quiet? Can you quiet, please? I know you're happy. Excuse me.
Exactly.
Finn, where are you?
I'm trying to put my phone back on charge. It's currently on 8%. And the only socket I have free is in the dining room.
And the podcast ends when Finn's phone dies.
Hey,
Just hear a beep, and it's dead. The thing that I mentioned to Andy the very first time I saw it was like within the first 20 minutes. Of course, she's going to have sex with Matthew Mahoney. You know?
All right.
She was like, "Yeah, okay."
Oh, is that why Ash likes it? He got was it 4 copies for his birthday?
He did, yeah.
4 copies of Contact?
Yeah.
He was talking about it on stream once, and as like a joke to annoy me. And then his best mate got him a DVD of it. One of our friends from Essex got him another copy of it, and then a lady I do my other podcast with also got him a framed disc of Contact as well. So he ended up with 3 copies of Contact on his birthday this year. I'm just going to pause right 1 second because we're going to go to the toilet. Be back in a second. Book amongst yourselves.
You better not take the phone to the toilet.
Do you think I do a live from the shitter on a podcast? What kind of man do you think I am?
Coming to you straight from the shitter.
So what I like to think about world building, flushes a toilet.
Well, if he's going to take his phone with him, then yes.
Do I pause this?
Nah, just keep recording. He'll cut it out.
He's just going to hear all of our natterings while he's on the toilet.
No, he's left the phone. He's fine.
When he plays this back.
Oh, yes, well, that's true. We can talk about him.
That Finn, jeez. Just...
Oh, even is this guy?
Have you seen Nicky Graham in Big Brother?
No, I don't watch
Who is
that
he?
sort of thing.
Who is he?
I don't think I've ever watched a season of Big Brother in my life, or even an episode. I mean, I know it exists, but I've never partaken.
I only know from reading like the trash sites what happens.
The only thing I know about him is whenever I watch, because the only basically like reality TV that I will watch is either cooking competitions or traders.
Okay.
Or interior design masters. Apologies. Please forgive me.
Have you not watched Grand Designs?
I don't think so. We might have done.
I love Grand Designs.
Is it better or on par with interior design masters?
On par,
Okay.
although you just end up with like severe house envy.
See, I don't think I need to reintroduce that into my life. As a new homeowner, the great urge is just looking at other houses and being like, God, why do we have this one?
You'll be thinking that when you have to change all these spotlights.
Oh, I don't know if you can tell how oppressed I am by the current spotlight right now.
Where are you in your office?
It's a lot. I am. We've redone the office, though, because since you
cool.
visited, the office, we have now put the standing desk. So we've taken the other 2 desks out, and we have just the standing desk in the middle of the office now.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to be putting all of our movie posters and stuff behind us here.
Oh, nice.
And then we're going to paint one half of the room a certain color, and then have the other part blank for all of our art and stuff to go up.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
He's back. Stop talking about him.
Deny.
What was
Fuckery
that
whenever
saying about my
used.
mother?
Well, after that nice little interlude.
Did I miss anything?